Hi everybody, welcome to IMPROVTOONS. This IMPROVTOONS is about you are an Armando. So sometimes we ask guests to be an Armando and they have no idea what it means. So you can forward them this IMPROVTOONS to give them an idea of some expectations or what it means to be an Armando. Some tips and tricks. Rainbow players. So you've been asked to be the Armando for your local improv team. What does that mean? Let me help you set up expectations of how the night's going to go. It's actually going to be a lot of fun and very little work for you. So here are rainbow players, and here's our Armando. This person's been asked. They're either a business owner of the community or a close friend or someone who's funny, someone they believe is going to bring a new element to the show. And let's say that's you, and so you've been asked to come on stage. Here's some tips I want to give you. When you're given a suggestion, you're typically given they get a suggestion from the audience. The rainbow players get a suggestion of crow, like the bird crow. Now, when you hear that, don't tighten up and think you need to be an expert on the word crow. Don't think you need to know that a bunch of crows is called a murder and that they're more intelligent than other birds and blah, blah, blah. They're not asking you to speak on the subject of crows. What they're asking you is to reflect on a crow and what crow triggers in you. Now, crow could mean it could just represent to you like a rural setting and you grew up in a farmland, or it could mean like black, like magicians and magic. Whatever the word means to you emotionally and personally, you don't have to talk about a crow, but that should trigger a story or response in you. And it can be a little further removed. And so you talk through it. Let's say you get this suggestion crow, and then I immediately go to, well, Game of Thrones, and there's the three-eyed ravens, and ravens aren't crows, but that's what triggered that. So I'm going to talk about Game of Thrones and da-da-da-da. So don't feel like once you get a suggestion, you have to talk about your expertise on that topic, or your story doesn't have to be directly related to that topic, but it has to trigger a story or a response in you. The second thing is when you're telling your story, it's best not to be vague. Don't say, well, somebody did something. Specifics, labels and brand names will really help the performers. So if you say, the suggestion was crows, and you said, I used to live in a rural area and it was very tough. That's not a lot of specifics. That's not a lot of labels. That's not a lot of brand names. So if you were to say instead, there was a big grass field and the grass was always kind of dying because it was not very watered and there was about a bunch of gophers there. Now, I've already added like 2 or 3 specifics to one field. So you don't need to ramble, although it's probably better to ramble than not to ramble, but you do want to add specifics, labels, and brand names. As a suggestion for brand names, it's like instead of going to the store, you went to the Aldi's or you went to Vaughn's. So brand names and specifics help. Also, tell personal stories. They don't want to hear you tell this plot to Game of Thrones or Star Wars. Everyone's seen that or has the ability to see that. The reason that you're there, what you have to offer is the stories that you've experienced. So if you get the suggestion laser gun and you're like, oh, in Star Wars, what happens is Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia meet and they fight Darth Vader. That's not what they want to hear. If you get laser guns, you may trigger Star Wars. You're like, oh, Star Wars. When I was a kid, the first time I got a Star Wars little figurine, it was Yoda and I lost the snake. And now I'm telling a personal story that's related to Star Wars, loosely related to laser. It's triggered by laser guns, which is the point. But I'm not retelling the plot line to a movie or a TV show I saw. I'm not telling a story that's someone else's story. I'm telling an individual story about myself. And then lastly, don't worry about being funny. Don't worry about being funny. Your job is not to be funny. Your job is you can be funny. If you want to be funny, tell jokes. That's totally fine. But your job is not to be the funny, entertaining one. Your job is to tell all these stories, and then the players will pull elements of those stories and pull out scenes. So all these stories I've told about being in a rural area and crows and McDonald's and all that kind of stuff, someone might come on and play a crow and say, did you see the last episode of Game of Thrones? I was really disappointed in it. Blah, 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 blah. When I talk about Yoda losing the snake as a little kid, someone could come on stage and be Yoda and be like, have you seen my snake? So they're going to take one little element from the story you tell and then do scenes and do a thread of scenes. And they might take a couple elements and do a couple scenes on it. Your job as the Armando is just to tell stories. I hope that helps. I hope that elucidates, it enlightens people. Maybe it's a resource for you. I always found that when I ask people to be an Armando, it's hard to conceptualize or tell people what it means to be an Armando until they actually see a show. And then some of the shows online had profanity or some material that I didn't feel comfortable representing our team. So this one I hope is so PG rated, it gives people an idea and it kind of lowers their anxiety so they can just sit back and have fun. And that is my cat Sydney. Bye.